Hi everyone, this is the video in which we're going to be discussing the poem El Olvido. You're going to need to write a paragraph on this, just one paragraph, but I want to talk us through this and talk us through the poem. So you'd already seen the movie Battle of the Breaths, and the idea behind watching that movie was to get you to think about how we can use metaphors. I mean, that was the whole idea of the oil and water that you talked about. The woman who created that film was using that oil and water as a metaphor, and it's something that, as we said in the film, is relatively easy to recognize because she keeps putting it out there, right? I mean, it keeps showing up, and you're wondering, how does that fit in? And that clues us in that it's a metaphor. And then you guys wrote about how exactly she uses that as a metaphor. What we want to do now is we want to look at a poem, and we want to see how the metaphors show up in the poem, and see how sometimes they may not necessarily be as easy for us to see, but they're still going to be there, and we need to think about how they operate. So I have the poem El Olvido here. You've got this in your folder. But I want to go ahead and read through it, talk about a couple of things that might be potentially confusing. You'll notice that over on the right-hand side here, I have notes, I have comments that kind of explain some things. I also have some things down here at the bottom. I have some questions that we could have down here, some words that I'm explaining down here. Over on the right-hand side, these are the kind of things that you might want to be thinking about as you are reading poems or stories. I put these here for now, but in other times when I give you poems, I may not have this kind of information. And so you might need to think about what questions you might want to ask. These things down here are more about specific words in there that you may not understand. And again, as I've said, you always want to be looking up words. If I didn't say that, I should have said it. That if you come up with something in the poem, go ahead and make sure to look it up. It's one of the questions sometimes I'll get. Sometimes somebody will say, "What does this word mean?" It's like, well, we've got Google and online dictionaries, and so go ahead and look those things up, because the truth is, when I see things that I don't know what they are, and that's what I do, is I look them up. So it's something that you should do. So let me go ahead and read the poem, and then and then we'll go through and talk about some of the things that we have here. So El Olvido, and actually even before I'm not going to stop all the way through here with the first time I read it, but I do want to stop with the title. El Olvido, I say down here, it's a Spanish word meaning the forgotten or oblivion. Okay, so we'll see what that means. So El Olvido by Judith Ortiz Cofer. It is a dangerous thing to forget the climate of your birthplace, to choke out the voices of dead relatives when in dreams they call you by your secret name. It is dangerous to spurn the clothes you were born to wear for the sake of fashion, dangerous to use weapons and sharp instruments you are not familiar with, dangerous to disdain the plaster saints before which your mother kneels, praying with embarrassing fervor that you survive in the place you have chosen to live, a bare, cold room with no pictures on the walls, a forgetting place where she fears you will die of loneliness and exposure. Jesus Maria Jose, she says, El Olvido is a dangerous thing. So one of the things to think about with this poem is I want you to, as we go through it, I did not accidentally put this poem up against Battle of the Breaths. It connects in a lot of ways. So it says El Olvido, which, as we said, means the forgotten or oblivious. And then it says, it is a dangerous thing to forget the climate of your birthplace. I put over here in a note, I said, dangerous in what way? Will you be injured or die if you forget the climate of your birthplace? I forget, it's usually, I forgot that it was a little more humid where I came from, or something like that. Unless we're talking about extreme cold or something like that, we're not really going to die because of that, just to forget that. And you're living in someplace else. You don't need to know that climate. So why is it dangerous to forget the climate of your birthplace? It is dangerous to choke out the voices of dead. I'm sorry, the next thing I'm going to look at is this forgetting. It is a dangerous thing to forget. it says to forget. This relates back to the title. It was called Olvido, means, as we said, the forgotten or oblivion, and it says forget here. And so, as I say in the comments over to the right, this relates back to the title, so it must be important. This is what I had said about how it can be dangerous to forget the climate of your birthplace that we talked about. And then down here, it is a dangerous thing to forget the climate of your birthplace. It is also dangerous to choke out, as it says, the voices of dead relatives. One of the things is, how can you hear the voices of dead relatives? And why would anybody bother to listen to them if you could? And why is it dangerous to choke out their voices, right? So you can't hear them, and shouldn't be able to hear them in the first place. If you can, why would you listen to them? And why is it dangerous to choke them out, or in some level not listen to them? And one of the things to think about here potentially is, are these dead relatives, are we supposed to think about those literally necessarily? Are we supposed to think about them in some other way? It's dangerous to choke out the voices of dead relatives when in dreams they call you by your secret name. What name are we talking about? Why do we have a secret name? It is dangerous to spurn, as I take down here, to reject with disdain. And by the way, the word disdain I have down here is the feeling that someone or something is unworthy of one's consideration of respect. So it is dangerous to spurn the clothes you were born to wear for the sake of fashion. Dangerous to use weapons and sharp instruments you are not familiar with. On some level, we could look at those things and say, well, it is dangerous to use weapons and sharp instruments you're not familiar with. But we all kind of knew that. We shouldn't just pick up a chainsaw if we don't know anything about how to use a chainsaw. We should probably learn something before we do that. But what does that have to do with all of this, right? It is dangerous to disdain, as we say, to feeling that something or something is unworthy or of one's consideration or respect. It's dangerous to disdain the plaster saints before which your mother kneels, praying with embarrassing fervor. And so, if we talk about these plaster saints, someone might be praying to actually saints in the church, right? Little figures of saints in the church. And why do we look down on those plaster saints before which your mother kneels, praying, as it says, with embarrassing fervor, which is an intense or passionate feeling? The mother seems to be very religious and seems to be praying, really meaning it when she's going to be praying. Why is it dangerous to look down upon that? And what the mother is praying for is that you survive in a place you have chosen to live, a bare, cold room with no pictures on the wall, a forgetting place. Forgetting, that's interesting. It shows up there as well, and in the title, where she fears you will die of loneliness and exposure. And exposure is a physical condition from being outside in severe weather without adequate protection. Is that what's, we're climbing up on a mountain somewhere? We're going out in the woods? Well, no, you're in an apartment. How would you die of exposure in an apartment, right? So as I say down here, where is this person chosen to live, right? And so realize that a lot of this does not make sense on some level if we take it literally. We can't think about the climate literally, right? We can't think about the voices of dead relatives literally. And so if we think about this poem as being about forgetting the climate of your birthplace, and we say, well, when you're forgetting the climate of your birthplace, you might be forgetting where you came from, right? If we take that not literally. Oh, now we can maybe see a connection to what was going on in Battle of the Breasts, where she was talking about the kind of conflict she was having from moving from one culture to the other. And here, Coffer seems to potentially be talking about the same thing. It is a dangerous thing to forget the climate of your birthplace. Well, then all these other things like the voices of dead relatives might make sense. Can we really talk to our dead relatives? Well, maybe not, but what does that potentially mean? What does it mean when she's talking about, again, those weapons or sharp instruments? What is she talking about with your secret name? What is your secret name? And so if we think about those things as metaphors, then they potentially make more sense here. So after, I want you to review the poem some more, think about these ideas, and then you've got the paragraph that you're supposed to write that explores some of these metaphors. As always, if you have questions, if you're all confused about what you're supposed to be doing with the paragraph, let me know. But you shouldn't be too stressed about this. I'm just saying I want you to begin writing a paragraph. Again, you've also got to look at the video and the document about topic, sentences, and support, and then you'll be able to do that. So I'm just kind of talking you through how to write a well-developed paragraph specifically about metaphors in this poem. So if you have any questions about that, make sure to ask me, but otherwise you can go ahead and write the paragraph.